aspects of his personality will remain the same. And so will yours. And that's okay. The purpose of your life is not to grow into somebody else. It's to lead from where you are. From where you are. That doesn't mean you can't grow. But here we bump smack into the second myth. Here's the second myth. Let's have that one up, just the myth. The myth is that you'll grow most where you're weakest. That's why we're so fixated on weaknesses, not because we're perverse. We focus on weaknesses because we think it's smart. We think we'll grow most there. Hands up if you're a parent. Hands up if you're a parent. Okay, you're part of the problem. Gallup asked this question. Some of you are familiar with it, but here is the question. Your child comes home with the following grades. English, A. Social studies, A. Biology, C. Algebra, F. And here's the question. Which grade deserves the most attention from you? The question didn't say, if you pick one grade, you must ignore all other grades. The question just said, hey, look, as a parent, you only have one thing to invest in your child, your time. So where are you going to spend most of it? And we asked that question, Gallup did, in the US, the UK, France, Canada, China, and Japan. Every single country, more than 70% of parents would say the F. We're raising a whole generation of kids who are being characterized by the people who love them the most, by who they aren't, rather than by who they are. Now, the point isn't here that you should ignore the F. You can't ignore the F. Your child can't fail the class, just like you can't ignore your own weaknesses. You can't. But that wasn't the question. The question is, where would you grow the most? You need to live by this truth. Let's have this truth up here. It's an obvious one. You'll grow most where you're already strong. That's why Tiger Woods is rebuilding his swing, because he's already got the best one on the tour. That's why when you take Shaquille O'Neal, the basketball player, who, by the way, has a glaring weakness, what is it? Free throws. That's why when he joined the LA Lakers, they said, we're going to stop working on free throws, and we're going to work on your play in the paint, under the basket. And he said, I'm already the best in the league. And they said, but you could be the best ever, and you're not yet. And he won the scoring title 3 years in a row. The Lakers happened to win the title 3 years in a row. And oh, by the way, his free throw percentage jumped 20 points. He went from terrible to really bad, but it got better. And that's, I mean, if you think about what a strengths-based conversation is like as a leader or as a parent. What's your name? Sue? Susan. So if I'm saying to Susan, let's say I'm a leader of Susan, and I figure out that she's a focused person. When everyone else is losing their head, she can stay focused, she can stay on track. By focusing on strengths, I don't mean that you go, hey Susan, jolly well done for being focused. You carry on with your focusy self. Okay, I don't do that. I'm going, that's not a strengths-based conversation. A strengths-based one is where you go, hey Susan, all right, I'm going to find out ways you can put yourself in situations where you can use that. What situations can we put you in which will challenge you to be even better than you are right now? What skills can you learn that will sharpen that strength of yours? How can you teach that strength of yours to others? If this is the best you got, Susan, bring it, bring it. I mean, that strengths-based conversation, if you've ever had one, is very demanding, isn't it? It says, hey, you're good. You could be awesome, and you're not quite yet. Let's step it up. You're the best in the league, Susan. You could be the best ever. Bring it. Now, that's much more challenging for me, because I've got to figure out creative ideas, because you're already good. But that's what leadership's all about. It's not about fixing all your weaknesses, it's about saying, step it up. Oh, and by the way, Susan, if you've got some areas that are Fs, I mean, let's go back to your child for a second. If your child's getting an F in math, there are 2 reasons why they're getting an F. One is they're bad at math. The second is they're really good at math and badly taught. Either way, the way to solve the F is through the A's. You sit down and you talk with your child about the A's, not to pat him on the head, jolly well done, Susan, but to say, hey, why are you interested in those subjects? Why are you so intrigued by those subjects? Why did you learn so much in those subjects? Is it the way you're taught? All the answers you get from that will help you with the F's. Live by that second truth. You'll grow the most where you're strongest. Doesn't mean you don't address your weaknesses. Address them. Just don't call them areas of opportunity. They're not. They're areas of least opportunity. Every one of you in this room have got places where you can grow, but you'll grow most where you're already strong. It's counterintuitive. Now, some of you might go, well, I'd love to do that. I'd love to build a team like that. I'd love to live my life that way. I'd love to be one of the 12%, but I can't, because I work as part of a team. And the team needs me to put aside my strengths for the benefit of the team. Because remember, there's no I in team. I've got to put aside me for the benefit of the team. Isn't that the right, the most honorable thing to do? No. It's the third myth. Let's have that up there. It's the third myth, that a great team member just puts their strengths aside and does whatever it takes to help the team. Because if you look at the best teams, they're not made up of a bunch of well-rounded people all blindly chipping in. They're all living by this truth. Let's have that third truth, if you would. They're all made up of individuals who've bothered to take themselves seriously enough to say, this is where my strengths are, and this is how I can volunteer them to this team. And then I've tried to find people who are strengthened by the very things that we can be. So the team has become well-rounded precisely because each individual in it isn't. Your chief responsibility as a team member is not some bland chipping inness. What the team needs to know from you is, where are your shoulders broadest? Where can we rely on you the most? What plays can you always run? We need to know that from you, because we can't see through the color of your skin or your sex or your age or your nationality. We can't see inside you. You can. We need to know that from you. And of course, sometimes you're going to have to chip outside your strength zone. But most of the time, we need you to volunteer your strengths to us. If you want to have the best example of a person who's lived their life this way, think recently of Warren Buffett. Remember, he did something really weird last June, didn't he? He gave away $31 billion, which is a little odd. So he held a press conference to explain why he gave it to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And do you remember this? He had two answers when somebody said, why'd you do it? He had two answers. One was really predictable, the other was just bizarre. The predictable one was this. He said, because they can give it away better than I can. Typical, pragmatic Buffett answer, right? They're better than me at that, therefore they get the money. And if he'd have left it at that, we'd have chalked it up to Buffett wisdom and off we'd have gone. But he didn't leave it at that. He couldn't. He said, besides, philanthropy is no fun for me. Okay, who says that? I mean, some of us may occasionally think that, but who actually comes out and says that? Who says it's way more fun squeezing one more little ounce of profit out of my companies than it is to increase child inoculation rates around the world? That is tedious and boring, but that, I mean, who says that? Now, you might not think there are any pressures, any social pressures on a billionaire, but one of the pressures on a billionaire is you better find a cause. Well, what he was saying is, I don't have any causes. But think about it. In saying that, he wasn't dismissing or disrespecting the goals of philanthropy. He was saying something much more sophisticated and much more dangerous, much more difficult to grab your head around and actually say out loud. He was saying, look, I so respect the goals of philanthropy, they can't be entrusted to a guy like me. That's leadership. So, if you wanted to become one of those 12%, one of the first things you've got to do is look at those three myths full in the face, blow them up, and put those three truths in their place. As you grow, you become more and more and more who you already are. You'll grow most where you're already strong. And what your team needs of you most of all is for you to take yourself seriously enough to figure out where you can volunteer your best to the team. And the funny thing is, if you can live by those truths, most of us anyway, aren't that far off from becoming one of the 12%. I'm not saying you believe this, but one of the cliches would be that for most of us to have the ideal life, our ideal life is far from the one we're living now. Our ideal life is one where we live in a log cabin in the hills of Oregon, disturbed only by the whinnying of our horse and the scent of the wet trees outside. Maybe that's me. But some special faraway life that's not ours. But weirdly, if you actually ask people, what is your ideal job? 60% of people say either what I'm doing now or a specialized subset of what I'm doing now. If you ask people, how often do you feel an emotional high in your week? How often do you feel an emotional high? More than 50% of people say to me that happens to me at least once a week. If you ask people, how often do you get so focused on what you're doing, you lose track of time and forget your troubles? 73% of people say, that happens to me at least once a week. So if you wanted to boil this whole strengths revolution down to size, it would be, how do you go from using your strengths in life about once a week, which let's say between 65 and 75% of us say at least once a week. How do you go from using your strengths once a week, where 65% of us do, to most of the time, where 12% of us do? How do you go from once a week to most of the time? I would suggest that if you're going to do that, first you need to believe the right things, but then there are 3 skills you need to learn how to do. This afternoon, we don't have time to cover all of them in detail. I'll cover one in detail, but there are 3, and without sounding too Oprah-esque, that's why I wrote the book, so that you could learn the 3 skills. That was a bit Oprah-esque, but I didn't know what else to say. Here are the 3 skills. First, you need to this is going to sound obvious. You need to identify what your strengths are. And most of us are just rotten at that. I've interviewed thousands and thousands of people on the question, describe your strengths. And you know the most common answer? You want to know by far the most common answer? I like working with people. Yes, I do. I am a people person. Yes, I am. People and me, we're like that, we are. How about that? People and me. No mention of which people. No mention of what you're doing with the people. Are you selling to them? Are you serving them? Are you saving them? What are you doing with the people? Just people. Me and people. You got to get specific. I'm going to spend a wee bit of time on that issue. And it's not just if you take a personality test like StrengthsFinder or Myers-Briggs. You got to get more vivid than that even. But that's the first thing. What are your strengths? Second, you got to change something. Each week, put together a strong week plan. No pun intended. Week. W-E-E-K. A strong week plan. Each week, you should have 2 things you're going to do to push your time toward your strengths and away from those things that weaken you. Each week, push your time toward your strengths. Think of the most effective people you know. Just get them in your head for a minute. Don't they seem to spend a disproportionate amount of time doing things that invigorate them? Well, that didn't happen by accident. They didn't just happen upon the perfect job. They gradually, each week, deliberately tilted their playing field and pushed their time deliberately towards certain activities and away from others. They made the best of their job into most of their job. You should do the same. Each week, put together a strong week plan. Third, you need to be able to talk about your strengths without bragging and your weaknesses without whining. You've got to be able to talk about your strengths in a persuasive enough way to get people around you to want to help you do what you want to do, which is build your job around the best of you. And that's hard. Most of the time when we say we have a strength, it sounds like we're boasting. Hi, I have empathy. Yes, I do. Empathy. I'm strategic. Yes, I am. I'm just I don't know where it came from. I'm just strategic. Oh, you're not? Oh dear. I am. Right? And how about your weaknesses? It's hard to talk about your weaknesses without sounding like you're a whiner. I mean, for those of you that are leaders, many of you obviously are, it's hard to walk in. By the time you're a leader, you're supposed to be well-nigh perfect, aren't you? It's hard to walk into a situation and go, you know what, I'm a leader, but I have no vision at all. Just can't see anything out there. It's crazy. And yet there are some leaders, I mean, if you think about the presidential candidates that are going to run for the President of the United States, they couldn't be any more different. Some of them have vision, some of them are great managers, some of them are conceptual, some of them are less conceptual, some of them are very energetic, some of them are more strategic than energetic. Every one of them will be a wee bit different. But it's a brave leader who can figure out a way to say, I am weakened by this activity, and not sound like a whiner. Now, again, I don't have time to go through every one of those 3 skills, but let's start with the first one. What are your strengths? What are your strengths? Yes, you can take personality profiles. Absolutely. Take StrengthsFinder if you haven't. Take Myers-Briggs if you haven't. Take DISC if you haven't. Those are all very good mind preparers. They get you thinking a bit about who you are and what you bring.